I have questions that are essentially probably much less about technology because we've already talked a lot about technology here. But I would like to ask you primarily how the use of data and all these things related to analytics, the readiness on the technology side and then using and implementing this in your companies have changed your companies, right? What do you see as the most noticeable aspects that are changing the organization? Because it's kind of like we perceive it as a kind of work with feedback. That is what we do. Changes us, right? I mean, it changes our organizations. How do you perceive it from this perspective? Krzysztof, you have the microphone, so maybe you can start.
Okay. Looking from the perspective of the heating industry, I think data unlocks the potential within the organization, to be specific and speak with examples. Our main source of data is heat meters. The data serves us, the data from the meters is used for issuing invoices. But how can it be utilized further? By accelerating data readings to 1 day instead of monthly granularity. We have created analytics with Alterdata that allow us to detect meter errors and analyze the amount of heat sold. We have broken down the silos of knowledge that were within the organization, allowing us to know our profit balance from sales precisely every day. We know when a meter is damaged. We also know how to predict when such failures might occur.
And how would you say this changes your organization in terms of, for example, the human aspects? Do you feel or observe that such a change is also occurring in the way of working?
There is definitely a change in the way of working. For one reason, processes that used to take about a month now take 1 day, allowing us to respond more quickly to certain failures, send the heating emergency services to the heating node, and take better care of our assets. This has reduced the amount of office work related to data checking, allowing us to focus more on analytics and what the data reveals. This really improves the quality of our work and discussions within the company.
Great, thank you. And Monika, what do you have to say on this topic?
Sure. Thanks, Kamil. I might start with a few words about what the company is, what the company does, the company Polski Światłowód Otwarty, because we have quite a specific, so to speak, history of its creation, which also affects how we have to handle data. Namely, PSIO was established as a spin-off from a rather large retail operator, which was involved in both selling internet, television, and telephone services to end customers, as well as building and maintaining network infrastructure. Well, due to, so to speak, strategic decisions by new investors, a decision was made to separate this infrastructure part and make it more widely available, not just to one operator, the retail operator, but actually to any retail operator who would like to use the reach of our network. The idea was for PSIO to be a technological platform that allows for a very simple and quick connection to this infrastructure and to quickly provide access to clients. By clients, I mean those operators, right? Who can quickly and in a truly automated manner, from an infrastructural standpoint, connect this service for their clients, send a technician, send service, and handle all things related to maintaining the operation of such internet. So it was supposed to be connected via an API or through some GUI system that would already be connected to our API. And everything is great. But we must remember that besides wanting to offer a new architecture, a newly built system architecture to potential new clients, we had this entire stack, essentially a company that had been operating in the market for several or even over 20 years,
UPC, for those who are not familiar.
And thus, we had a volume of 1.5 million customers and the entire data history that also needed to be integrated with the data we simply had from the new architecture. So here, well, how did this story even begin? Well, we had the need to integrate this data because how else can you make any decisions in the company? As has been mentioned many times here, right? We had very siloed systems. At the start, let me say, we had 13 systems to integrate into our reporting system. So it was simply a necessity. It was something obvious that the company had to do. However, during the course of conducting our business, additional needs began to emerge because, as I think Oleg mentioned in his presentation, generally speaking, the approach to data is not a project, it's a relay race where we constantly look at what needs arise. And it turned out that there was a need, for example, to issue invoices from a single billing system because we still had these worlds, this legacy, right? This stack of, let's say, UPC clients separately. We had new clients separately. However, such integrations where these legacy systems, let's not hide it, are also intended to be phased out in the future. We are striving for that. I will add that the UPC CRM is written in COBOL, so it wasn't...
We're reaching far back indeed.
It wasn't very optimal to integrate directly. That's why the idea emerged not only to read data, but also to load data from our reporting system. And I think it's not a super novelty, but nevertheless, in our organization, it was quite a revolutionary approach because until now, we rather considered such integrations through some reporting system as not quite kosher, right? However, it was also an important assumption to perform transformations of this data along the way. And really from this idea, which was built for this one specific need, a very specific materialized business need, currently, since the implementation, we are actually supporting 4 additional business processes with this technical process, right? So loading data somewhere externally. So I think that here, yes, data in general, data handling, the data approach has significantly changed for us in the company, allowing us to be ready for such quick wins, really some quick integrations when we cannot afford it, for various reasons, mainly economic, strategic business decisions to... we are simply looking for such creative new solutions, right?
Great. Thank you very much. Who's next? Robert?
Sure. I won't talk about the data flow itself anymore because I just mentioned it. But when we started this part, with digital transformation, we realized that we didn't have anyone on board who could handle it. So you can either build teams, Konda, that will do it, and deal with all the associated risks like departures, arrivals, retraining people, and so on, or buy the expertise on the market. Then we basically did it to make it more reliable, even though it's not cheaper, but maybe in the long run, it might even be cheaper. We utilized external expertise. This included Alterdata and other companies I mentioned along the way. Simply put, we are not able to acquire such data, generate all these flows, or handle the development. So we focused on project management, all of that. And that's one thing, because the company, Kitamon, has some technological, age-related and competency-related debt. A business unit was established, a business unit responsible for the development of digital systems, this entire part of the business lines. And only after some time, once it crystallized a bit, well, there was this startup within the organization, and we concluded that we have the initial processes. Fairly well established, everything operates in a repeatable manner. The sales departments know how to use it. Initially, they didn't know how, and neither did the clients. It was all new, so there was a process of education. So only when everyone started to feel comfortable with each of these stages, We normalized it with other company processes because invoices need to be issued from a single system. When a salesperson goes to a client, they go with both digital and non-digital products at the same time to a single client. So there was a period of incubation, a certain degree of autonomy, and a tolerance for mistakes, because we didn't know what would come of it, as you have heard. Only after refining the processes to ensure that the amounts on the invoice, some contracts and regulations were correct, only at the end was it strongly integrated with sales processes, reporting, and so on and so forth. So that's how our adventure looked from the operational, organizational side and so on. We still don't have our own developers for this. We continue to use outsourcing because we assume that at some point this large development will end and later it will only be maintenance, possibly adding some smaller things. And we're not a software house. We definitely wouldn't be able to maintain those people. Besides, you can see for yourselves, there are various situations in the market. Sometimes these people are needed, sometimes they're not, and so on, these fluctuations. So I prefer to have the guarantee of continuity in the project, even though it costs us.
Great. And tell me, how did this affect your business? For example, the creation of this DOH product, as much as, of course.
I'll say this, in the short term, you could say it helped, but we probably would have survived with analog. But in the long term, it's a matter of survival, because we are effectively competing with the internet. So, of course, we have this old analog leg, and it will probably sustain us for years to come. But without building a new leg that will take over the revenue, acquire new clients, not only from Poland, but also from abroad, because we will simply integrate with foreign sales networks thanks to these tools. There are such networks. We will acquire the entirely new funds, not only from the clients we have worked with so far, but also from Europe and the world. And this is already happening because we have the first revenues. Now we will scale everything. So in the long term, it's basically a matter of to be or not to be.
Great. Thank you very much, Christopher.
Maybe I'll put it a bit differently. Yes, recently we had a conversation with the users of our reports, which were created based on the data warehouse of the analytical tool. And there, such information appeared. Now, I don't have to spend a day making slides that I have to present to the management. I have it ready. Now I don't have to spend days copying and creating formulas in Excel. I have ready-made sliders, fields, views, and so on. So evidently, if we return to the question of how data and analytics have changed, it's changed for everyone, or at least for those who have had the opportunity to already benefit from this prosperity. It's simply a time saver and allows the use of that time for more creative work than making slides and copying data in Excel. These are examples from the field, from the front line. And I also wanted to point out, because I think each of you here mentioned something important, that I would summarize it like this. Starting the journey with data, although it's unclear when it really begins, right? And it probably will never end. It's a change for the organization. And if we listen to all these cases, it's always like this. The change starts with a small incubator. Then there's a second one, then a third one, right? Then it grows, then it radiates, and we start to speak a slightly different language within the company. It's somewhat the same with us, right? This also means that during these subsequent implementations, people learn. Sometimes they discover that there are things like data, however that may sound, right? And how important they are and what can be done with them. Because contrary to appearances, it turns out that many employees in business are not aware of this. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing your stories here. And now, it has already been mentioned, but I will ask a bit more in depth. This was mentioned in your statements about these challenges, what they also concerned, but I would like to direct the discussion a bit towards this field, because as we pointed out in our introductory summary this morning, there are several areas of challenges. The first area of challenges, as we observe, it is, of course, the ability to develop a business goal or outline a concept, then experiment, and so on. On the other hand, some form of leadership is needed for this, not necessarily always at the highest level, if it is to be a truly data-driven organization, but sometimes at the level it concerns, such as a department, area, division, and so on. But data itself is also a challenge, as it has been mentioned. Data in itself is, so to speak, an elusive matter that can only create something. Then the challenge becomes the tools and following that, the skills and competencies. This has also been mentioned, as well as a certain work culture. This has also been mentioned, right? The organizational culture that changes through this type of approach. If you were to make a sort of ranking in your conscience, what is the most important? What is the biggest challenge? The human issues, the technical ones, or those related to skills? Or maybe data is the biggest challenge in your organizations, or perhaps the issue of leadership. How do you feel about it? Who wants to go first? You can.
I'll take the liberty to start. I think it depends, but if I had to choose, definitely data right off the bat. I'll be repeating myself here, but it's fundamental. However, yes, leadership too. There has to be a champion who has some influence and can lead the masses. But the rest really depends a lot. It somewhat depends on what our most urgent, most important business challenges are, right? So here you probably need to set the agenda yourself. Whether it's a matter of tools or data cleaning, I would be cautious about trying to change the organizational culture right off the bat, because it strangely happens to be a consequence of certain actions, not the beginning. So we can think about that in a moment. Once we have some tools in the field and some people who already understand what we are doing and why.
Great, thank you. Who wants to go next?
Maybe I will speak up. Regarding challenges, I think the biggest challenge I faced was at the very beginning when I was invited to the PSIO project. It was a very small team. In fact, I joined as the third person in a team that was supposed to create a reporting system and data warehouse from scratch. And I knew from the very beginning that it wouldn't succeed if we didn't take care of the plan. Really, from the business side, a strategy for the entire approach to how we want to handle this, what approach we want to have towards data, and what we understand by various business concepts, right? I had experiences, among others, from working at UPC, which is probably a classic case, right? How many services did we sell, and what is a service? I knew that this is something we need to address from the very beginning. On the other hand, there was, of course, a lot of pressure to deliver some value as quickly as possible, any reports, because the organization was blind without them. So balancing this and actually convincing the organization that it's important to place these business concepts in a glossary to describe, write, meet, and find time for people from the business who were also totally absorbed in their own activities. It was a very big challenge, but I think we managed, especially since, of course, we haven't described all the scopes and all the concepts yet. We are doing it in small steps because we also have to keep in mind that, as mentioned here, a waterfall approach will not work, right? Here you need to break it down into smaller pieces, deliver the value continuously, and work within narrower scopes. And I think we have mainly succeeded in convincing the organization of how important it is to build business concepts. And now whenever a new business process emerges, the first thing we do by default is sit down and arrange these business definitions. However, E.ON another very significant challenge, aside from what I mentioned earlier, such as legacy data and distributed technological systems, because a lot has already been said about that. The second challenge is when we thought that, let's say we had everything organized, the data from the systems was integrated into one place, the system was stabilizing and it was working quite well. Then suddenly it turned out that as a result of the company's strategic decisions, the operation, so to speak, not so much changed, but expanded to include a very large area, namely M&A activities, which means acquiring external companies to expand reach. This resulted in us suddenly, literally overnight, receiving a huge amount of additional tables, data, and types of data to integrate. And they were not structured in any way among themselves.
And there was no glossary.
And there was no glossary, that's right. So, in fact, this is also a challenge we are currently facing, to build such structures that will uniformly collect data from different companies and sources into one place, which can then be universally integrated with the rest of these models. And again, there is a constant emphasis here on delivering value quickly. So two things definitely help us with this. Firstly, data form. This wasn't supposed to be about technology, but just in a few words. Data form, which independently manages dependencies between queries. If we are building a model and also had to ensure that queries are executed in the correct order, it would definitely take us much more time. And it would certainly be prone to errors. However, here, the data form service significantly streamlines the process of adding new pieces to existing models. And the second thing, which Oleg talked a lot about yesterday, is orchestration and truly ensuring the execution of individual, so to speak, pieces of this entire puzzle, which really consists of many different sources. And as I said, these are large CRMs, but also just CSV files uploaded to a bucket, because we encounter such data sources as well. So managing this by a person, where we are a relatively small data team, would be simply impossible without certain automations and orchestration.
Great, thank you. I myself am a big fan of Dataform and similar tools like DBT, even though I've never used them, but generally speaking, I haven't used them personally. But when we worked before these tools appeared, our, so to speak, missing link was exactly something. There's no need to write down what is what in some Confluence Word or other notes, and you can even integrate it with a repository and have version control. So when these tools appeared, our eyes just lit up, and now we probably don't go anywhere without this idea. But returning to the challenges, Krzysztof.
I think one of the challenges worth noting is leadership, especially in the context of how to use data, how to unlock its potential, and breaking down these knowledge silos. In heating companies, it often happens that we have different departments for sales, production, and each is attached to its own data. And we can unlock this potential when we find one truth within the company. We will utilize the data and extract real value from it by applying predictive models through meter analytics, which I mentioned. And only at the very end, looking at this, we have an integration challenge where after breaking down these silos, we can integrate individual data or those departmental solutions from different areas into one system so that we can view the heating system from the heat source, the heating network, the heating node, and the client at the very end, who is ultimately the most important, and deliver one product that will operate on one set of data, providing a holistic analytics for the enterprise. But this cannot happen without, first of all, the vision of breaking down silos and finding that one truth.
Great, thank you. Robert, What challenges do you see as the most important?
I mean, paradoxically, and these are probably not technological challenges because they were difficult, but easy to address, in the sense that we knew what we wanted to do. We didn't know if we would succeed, but when we did succeed, it turned out that the problem was a certain organizational culture, habits, comfort zone, because everyone would like new things to be like the old ones, so that it would be managed the same way, sold the same way, so that even in the applications, the buttons for specific things that people are used to would be the same. However, aside from the fact that everything was based on data, the entire model of selling services and processing everything was completely different. So these were challenges that one might think wouldn't occur at all. However, this also partly stemmed from the fact that, as I mentioned, it was an internal startup that was delivering certain services, goals and so on, and then we tried to somehow integrate it into existing processes, because there has to be one general process, sales related and so on. And now, without some determination and approval for various things from the management, meaning awareness at the top level, probably some kind of boycott at the bottom could cause many things to fall apart. And this determination from the management, with some patience, of course, along with education, courses and training, to show how we want to do it and what the end goal is, led to the fact that these people, even though they are stepping out of their comfort zone, see that it doesn't take away their work, because the work will always be there. It's just that someone had their own little garden, tended somewhere, relationships and so on. And now all these relationships need to be reestablished. And this is an internal situation, but a similar situation occurred with clients. Because if for N years, both salespeople and OT planners have been working with someone on the other side, and now a completely new currency appears. We're talking about something different in a different way, and these words don't always mean the same thing. So suddenly there's also some resistance there. But why change if it has been good for so many years? So paradoxically, the technological part was difficult, but we knew that once we got through the R&D phase, then scaling, development, and so on, we would deliver it sooner or later. But then it needs to be consumed. And it's important not to overlook this element in various projects.
Great, thank you. I still have questions, but I'll hold on to them for a moment, as there might be questions from the audience. Maybe someone would like to ask the speakers. Everyone is tired. All right, I have one last question for today before we wrap up, because all of you here are an interesting representation in that you have all undergone a certain digital transformation, and this is evident from your words and discussions. It's not a case of being finished, checked off, and we can go home. Of course, it continues to progress. And now, in a way, you all have various cloud technologies, you all have data warehouses, and you have various applications of machine learning, both AI, BI, and generally speaking, on the scale of these different things we've talked about. You are developed organizations. Of course, there are various challenges, but in this technological area, do you see anything that seems particularly important to you now? Do you expect some kind of evolution or revolution from a technological standpoint? Do you perceive or notice anything like that, or is there something you would wish for?
I have the microphone, so I guess I'll start, right? I'll say that I don't know. I mean, we're still at the stage where we're finishing things we set out to do some time ago. If I were to answer the question, for example, whether I am able to replace everything, I talked about today with some artificial intelligence to have it handle the entire process end to end, including planning and processing and so on. I can't imagine that at all. So for various reasons, especially when it comes to data quality, overseeing the process, checking everything, I wouldn't manage it with artificial intelligence to be sure that what goes in and comes out is correlated. However, certainly all individual stages that require automation and perhaps removing them from some traditional programming processes, we would gladly delegate to artificial intelligence. Some we are already delegating. As I mentioned, some tasks were carried out with the help or involvement of such tools because it was efficient. So definitely a case-by-case analysis. The amount of data we process is constantly growing, so we also rely on recommendations from Alterdata. It's not like we implement something thoughtlessly because money is also involved. There is some efficiency in implementing these various systems, so common sense is also present here. However, strategically, we are aware that we need to scale this. Not always linearly and not always just by adding some resources in the cloud. Sometimes there will be other solutions, but this is still an area we are learning about. So we don't know exactly what will happen and what we will need to respond to.
Thanks so much, Monika.
Sure.
Will technology surprise us? Or what do we expect from it?
Yes, there's a lot of discussion about it. We also talked a lot about it at the conference. Generally, as you said, buzzword, GenAI. In our company, we have also been discussing it a lot recently, and we definitely see a future in it. However, it's also important to carefully consider the business needs within the context of your organization, because there's a lot of talk about agents, like, for example, in a BI tool, you can query some data, make predictions, and so on and so on. However, as I mentioned, firstly, without a good data catalog or glossary, we probably won't be able to communicate much with artificial intelligence in natural language. And it is certainly a significant task. However, often the expectations within an organization are to deliver value here and now to quickly and immediately solve the problems we have today. Of course, not necessarily overnight, but to have a solution available within a few weeks. So in my opinion, we should constantly be thinking and really looking for these problems in order to find solutions for them. For example, we came up with the idea of a real quick win. When it comes to the data warehouse, initially it was basically used by one department, almost entirely by the commerce department, where sales data and so on were analyzed. Sławek probably mentioned yesterday that once the word gets out that there's something useful, other departments gradually want to start using it as well. And suddenly it turns out that, for instance, the accounting and finance department has joined, so to speak, our team of active users. We've also created automation for them to generate certain data, for example, into batch files for other systems, which reduces the time needed for certain manual tasks. Previously, they would spend the whole day processing just 2 invoices. Now we are able to process 20 invoices of this type in 2 hours, so it spreads. And suddenly it turns out that everyone starts reaching out to our data OPS department with questions like where to extract this from or where to extract that from. Because we already have access, but we don't know how to use it. The data is in the warehouse. One-to-one, just like in the data lake. As a result, not everyone has the knowledge. Of course, we have documentation. But let's be honest. Who refers to the documentation when they want to quickly extract some data? Probably not, rather not. Users tend to go to the person they consider to have that knowledge. And in this case, we get a lot of questions that we can't answer quickly, right? So even just for fun. During one of the AI trainings where we discussed how language models work, we joked that we could use a chatbot to answer those questions.
When we talked, it was supposed to be a chatbot, Monika.
No. Yes. I thought it would stay behind the scenes, but we laughed that there should be a Monika chatbot to answer those questions. And after a while, it seemed like it wasn't a bad idea at all. And I started to think about what questions I get asked most often. And it turns out that they repeat. So these are most often questions like how to write SQL for a certain system. Yes, we have documentation. I have that knowledge in my head, so to speak. I have a series of queries with which I can train this model. Why not? And really, this is something that can be delivered very quickly. And so we start to multiply such use cases. So without further ado, we really want to solve problems that are here and now, simultaneously. Of course, we should dedicate some percentage of our time to building long-term target solutions. But I also believe that the key is to quickly deliver value.
Great. Thank you very much. No, Krzysztof or Krzysztof.
That's me. I might approach this a bit more philosophically and holistically, however that may sound. But I have this thought, and I'm quite convinced of it, that an increasing value for the team and organization is and will be how well and quickly it can learn. And this is not about AI, it's about people. Everything is moving so fast and changing so much that this is the way to somehow keep up with the pace of these changes, these ideas, these possibilities. But it seems to me that increasingly we need to create a new balance between how much time we dedicate to our development and how much time we spend on current work, because it might not have been so critical in the past. But now it seems to me that there's a risk that if someone focuses only on current work and doesn't give teams the opportunity to learn, at some point, the business will have to be wrapped up faster than we thought. Just a thought. That's first thing. And secondly, I have an open question. I started to wonder whether we will reach a point where this loop will close for us, meaning, will we have such good data generated by some form of intelligence or produced, from which this or that form of intelligence will also use and generate new ideas? It's a bit subversive because we all say here that we have data and then it works, but what if we actually had them? Is this what awaits us? I don't know, but it's like
We'll have that thought in the afternoon.
conversations in the kitchen. Thank you.
It's just like last time. When you talk about this loop, it just reminded me of how last time we were doing a workshop, a use case. For AI usage, it ended up with us asking the AI what the use cases for AI could be. So in a way, it's already happening.
Referring a bit to what Krzysztof already said, I think one of the challenges will be how to digitize the knowledge of our technical employees in order to make better decisions later based on digital systems. We have a very large amount of documentation knowledge and long-term expertise from people, but this needs to be transferred somehow to systems that help make decisions in managing heating systems. There are more and more challenges. There is decarbonization, how to work financially efficiently, be greener, how to adapt to the changing electricity market, and cooperate in the heating system with the capacity market. And technologies should help us with this. Firstly, in technologies that will facilitate decision-making based on our local knowledge resources. This includes the specifics of a given heating system, but also technologies that will be able to quickly exchange data with the capacity market and cooperate in such a way as to seek opportunities to, for example, take more energy from renewable sources available in the system and use it for heating purposes. So here, I think that firstly, the digitalization of our knowledge and its preservation for new employees. Secondly, assistance in decision-making and fast computational methods, as well as dynamic data exchange with the market and other markets to look holistically at the heating and energy market, not just from the perspective of an island, which is the heating network.
Great. Thank you all very much. I am inspired by various thoughts as well. So thank you for participating in the panel, for the discussions and for the presentations. And I thank all of you for coming and those who stayed until the end for your patience and open minds to listen to all of this. I hope it will inspire you in some way as well. We remain available for contact. As Bartosz mentioned, the recordings will also be available for participants, right? Yes, so that you can refer back to the presentation.